Y'all know y'all gotta look at this is a crop hoodie. Got it from Mushroom Beach. Today's video, we are talking about Neurons to Nirvana. It is a documentary. It is on Tubi, which means it's what? Free. Y'all know I be having my list. And baby, let me tell you, Neurons to Nirvana, baby, list thick. So let's get to it. This documentary comes through psychedelic and hallucinogenic drugs, and it also breaks it down in an organized way where it's like every part of the film got its own little section. It is about an hour and 10 minutes long. They talk about LSD, they talk about shrooms, they talk about ayahuasca, they talk about cannabis as well. First one they talked about was LSD, and these are some of my notes that I took. LSD helps people see past culturally imposed norms. One thing that they talked about in the LSD section was how the government was trying to use LSD and introduce it to people in the war for the purposes of restoring social control. However, when people would do the LSD and they would be tripping, people was like having all these epiphanies like,
why the fuck am I in this war? Like, why the hell am I doing this? This shit don't even make sense. I'm out here fighting for my life and our freedoms over here for what? Who said that? You know that don't make sense, right? Y'all didn't think that through, did y'all? Okay, yeah, no. This some bullshit. Count me out. I don't want to do this anymore.
And so people was just starting to wake the fuck up. And then the government was like,
oh shit, okay. This is fucking bad.
It kind of reminded me of some things that I saw in other films and documentaries where they talked about how LSD was really introduced as a form of like mind control because the government didn't really understand the scientists who made it by accident. And I'm not going to tell y'all 100% about that in this video because there's another video that goes into full detail and I want to use that space to talk about it over there. However, as far as the role that the government plays in the legalization of psychedelics, we're going to talk about that because it's so crazy. However, in Neurons to Nirvana, they did talk about the ways in which the government went about getting something banned. They basically said in order to ban a drug, you have to paint it as dangerous and addictive. It is a irrational, fear-based reaction, and that's also one of the things that they use to get the research shut down. Essentially, oh, it's this, it's that, and they capitalize on the lack of knowledge. And it's also a rat race about the lack of knowledge because you have people who are funding the research in order for there to be knowledge, but then the government shut down the research. So then they be like, oh, well, prove to me this. You know, where's your research? And it's like, ain't no research because y'all made the shit illegal. Y'all stopped it. Y'all interrupted our funding. And then now y'all are coming after people and they fucking degrees, they livelihood. Y'all are attacking the therapists. Y'all are attacking the funding. Y'all are attacking every single thing that it would take for us to learn about this, and y'all making it illegal so that when you be like, where's your research to prove your point? It's like, ain't no fucking research because y'all fucked it up. Right. So they also talked about too how a lot of people who was taking LSD were benefited from it because they were able to just recognize the pain that they was running from mentally, emotionally, and I fucking love that. One thing I do want to say that was consistent with every breakdown, and it started with LSD, they use visuals to explain the things that happen in your brain as far as your chemical reactions while you're on a substance and when you're not on that substance and what it does to different parts of the brain. So they talk about your frontal lobe, they talk about the lobes that are in the back of your head, they talk about like receptors being turned on and being stimulated, and I enjoyed that very much. I feel like it just helps connect the dots for people who are not like sciencey, if that makes sense. Like, I love science. I'm kind of a nerd. So like watching this, it was like, oh my God, yes, that makes sense. Okay, I get it. And I think that like people who are not like that, it will help them get it too. Moving on, the next thing they talked about was psychedelic mushrooms and psilocybin. Their main focus was that they would administer psilocybin to cancer patients because they were pretty much a crowd of subjects who were just at a point that was like,
look, I already got cancer. I'm already prepared for the worst. I could die. I'm willing to try anything that would helped me deal with this process of going through not only chemotherapy, but being a cancer patient and all the changes that come with that.
They were trying to help people with depression, anxiety, and they had a screening process for that. And I'm like, fuck, I wish they would have elaborated on that a little bit more, because that type of insight would definitely have given people who are in that situation and don't have access to the clinical trial a leg into, or at least a foot in the door into getting some type of clarity, like, oh, so I'm not the only one, like I have options, like, I don't know, it just made my wheel spin. So I feel like it could make other people's wheels spin too, who are in that exact predicament. They also talked about how their goal was to help with the distress and the relief from suffering. That is also very common. It's a theme that I'm seeing in a lot of these psychedelic documentaries and cancer patients and psilocybin mushrooms. That's a thing. The same way alcoholics and LSD is a thing. Those two things together are working positively towards progress, change, and solutions. And honestly, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, he's the one who tried LSD to help with his addiction, and it helped him completely get the fuck off of alcohol altogether. They talked about lucid dreaming. They talked about how shrooms activates the frontal cortex, and one of the other things that they talked about was how psilocybin turns off the blood flow to certain parts of the brain, and when that happens, it allows other parts of the brain to flourish more. It allows the other parts of the brain to flourish more in a way that would not happen if psilocybin was not there, because then those parts of the brain that were still turned on, they're like, yeah, pop, right? Like they're clashing. But when you turn them off, it's like, okay, you shut the fuck up. All right, you, what do you got? Let's see. Go for it. And it's like, okay, now that this motherfucker to shut the fuck up, this part of the brain that been sitting in the corner stagnant because they were stressed out from this motherfucker running their mouth, now they're silenced. Go for it. What are you gonna do now? It's your world. We're the squirrels. Make your magic happen. So I thought that was pretty fucking interesting. They had a visual for that as well. I really liked how they explained that aspect of it. Moving on to MDMA. This section kind of big. I ain't even gonna hold you. They talked about a lot in this section, and I feel like this was the most informative of all the sections that they discussed in general. They explained the difference between a Schedule 1 versus a Schedule 3 drug. Now, I know I haven't personally talked to y'all about scheduling, but it's basically like the classification of certain drugs. So Schedule 1 is like dangerous as fuck, addictive, illegal, yada yada yada, rah, bad. Because who's doing the scheduling? Okay, right. So as you go up in number, less addictive, less dangerous, less all that bullshit, less. They also talked about how MDMA works similar. It's the reverse of what amphetamines do to your brain. So like methamphetamine and its relationship to dopamine, the way that it's released, but MDMA is the opposite of that process. So yeah, that's where the good shit come in at, because yeah, I don't really know how to explain that 100%, but y'all just gotta watch it. I would have to look into it. It talked about how MDMA releases dopamine and serotonin, which makes it the reverse process of amphetamines, like methamphetamine, right? So it also made a mention of how epinephrine in that whole swirl of dopamine and serotonin work, and yeah, so just throw all that shit in the pot and mix it up. Yeah, because I got it a little bit, but that's something that I'm gonna have to look more into. They also talked about what's called anxiolytics. The distinguishing difference that they were making was about sedating anxiolytics, and essentially those are your antidepressants, right? So antidepressants sedate you. That's the shit that make you feel like, you know, when people be like, I don't like taking this medicine because it make me feel like a zombie. That's because it has a sedating nature to it. However, ecstasy is a non-sedating anxiolytic, and it is an immediate acting non-sedating anxiolytic. It is a serotonin agonist, which means that it floods and it activates the receptors. As I have discussed with y'all before, serotonin is the natural chemical that your body releases when you are happy. I'm kind of explaining this the best way that I can. So we have dopamine and we have serotonin. It's being released. It does the same thing. It does the reverse of what amphetamines do, which is why it makes you feel good, right? It is a serotonin agonist, which means that it floods with serotonin. It activates the receptors. It is non-sedating, and it is an anxiolytic that is immediate. Everybody like, okay, you just explained all of that shit. What the fuck do it mean? It means that essentially ecstasy is the most non-addicting, immediate acting, instant antidepressant. That's pretty much how you sum that shit up. They also discussed how in psychiatry there are no antidepressants that are not sedating. They also found that MDMA, it enhances memory, it helps with PTSD, and it helps with emotional anxiety and numbing. Given all of that, it is also the reason why it is becoming another section of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy, in case I need to spell it out for y'all. Using psychedelics in therapy to address your problems, move forward, and make progress in your life. It's a way to help you unpack yourself emotionally, mentally, and yeah. MDMA is allowing people to face their fears without feeling overwhelmed, and they're able to have an emotional connection during that time as well. Given that, the clinical trials for MDMA are being used to treat people with PTSD. So, we got ecstasy for PTSD, psilocybin mushrooms for cancer patients, LSD for alcoholics. Sound like a fucking plan, right? Yeah. They also found during the clinical trials that ecstasy enhances your oxytocin release. Now, I can't explain that. Y'all gonna have to look that one up. I don't know. I can't explain that one yet, but we're gonna get there. They are also realizing that it's not a long-term fix. However, it is allowing people in the moment while they're on it to get the insight, and it is helping people to open doors and just be ready to accept shit. So, yeah, MDMA, we making some progress. Now, of course, the next thing on the list is weed, the ganja, the marijuana. You know what I'm saying? Mary Jane! Alright, so let's talk about weed. Now, with cannabis being the first thing that is really like on the let's legalize it, let's profit off of it train, you know, I kind of feel like this has set the tone for all other psychedelics and everything that I have previously mentioned. Look at the way they demonized it. Look at all the misinformation that they came out with about it. Think about the literal profit of marijuana. The fact that it is natural, the fact that it can grow, the fact that you can grow it at home, the fact that nobody can control what you do in your own house. And when Big Brother can't get his cut or whatever the fuck you doing, it's like,
oh, why you making money off of this and I can't make money off of it? Where my cut at? Ain't no cut for me, ain't no cut for you. No, cut is illegal. Fuck is you talking about?
Now that weed is like decriminalized in a lot of states, it's getting legalized in a lot of states. Every place is different. But now that there is a benefit off of it, oh, look at all these dispensaries that's up. Look at all these people who making millions and billions of dollars off of the weed industry, but you still got people sitting in jail for the shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, that don't work out for me. But anywho, it's the step-by-step process of how you could expect for the legalization process to go for all of these other psychedelics. Let's talk about Neurons to Nirvana take on weed and some of the notes that I took for them. They discussed how the government used the media to fund stories on harm, not benefits, the lies of the media. They also mentioned drug money and trafficking, how with it being illegal and how it being legal, like it's really the same risk. I also like the fact that they talked about,
oh, well, we need to protect the kids.
Yeah, y'all be on some bullshit, because if anything, kids will find their way to shit no matter what it is. Informing your kids about drugs needs to come from you. They don't need to learn about the shit from the streets, because 9 times out of 10, they're gonna try it, they're gonna get wrapped up in it, and then what? You should have told them about that shit from the very fucking beginning. So there's that. The same way I told y'all earlier as far as research, they really framed that piece of their argument around marijuana. They also pulled up a conversation with President Nixon where he was talking about like his take on weed and how he wanted it to look bad. They came receipts. Do you hear me? They came receipts. I loved it. They also talked about revolutions. They talked about people waking the fuck up the same way they did with LSD. And then the last and final thing that they really tapped into was how they did not want drugs to be legal because they work better than prescriptions. And that was their segue into talking about prescription drugs. And that was honestly, whew, that was good too, but that was at the end. The last and final thing that they talked about was ayahuasca. Y'all don't know what ayahuasca is? Essentially, it's a tea. It's brewed from leaves and a vine. They put it in this pot, they add water, and they boil it. It turned dark brown. Now, that is what's considered like really sacred. However, that is also a psychedelic, and that has more like ritualistic purposes associated with it. Ayahuasca is known as the vine of the soul. Listen to me. When it comes to these conversations about psychedelics, Gabar, Big Dog, is the GOAT. I don't know how else to explain it. He is a fire-ass therapist. He loves psychotherapy. He is experienced in being a system of support during ayahuasca retreats. Ain't no therapist fucking with him. He's so in tune, and that's what I love. Now, with the ayahuasca conversation, this was really the psychedelic that they based the whole medicine is based on plants talking point. They went into the cultural aspect of ayahuasca and different experiences that people have had on it, what you see when you drink it, the things that people have felt, the ways in which they were able to just unpack themselves. They was unpacking their traumas. They was unpacking things that they have been running from in their mind. One thing that they made mention of is that ayahuasca helps people tap into the wisdom in the psyche that shows them what they need to mature. I never really could put into words the way I felt on Shroom until that particular line, and I think that's it. I've always said that shrooms take you to the front door of your problem. It shows you the things you need to mature. That is the best way that I could describe it. They discussed cultures and their use for it respectfully. They talked about how they are teaching and coaching the use of ayahuasca so that the respect that they want for it is still maintained, and then people also have the opportunity to do it within that cultural setting so that they can have their own personal experience with it as well. So I love that. They also talked about clinical neuroscience. They also described how when people are on ayahuasca, it's really a purging. Things like anger, pain, resentment, and just shit that they've been holding on to that they needed to let go of. Now, as far as it pertains to the pharmaceutical industry, they talked about how there's a difference between medicating yourself and prescription drugs. They described it as medicating yourself into happiness without addressing the foundations of what make them feel bad. That encourages dependence and it masks the symptoms, which dampen identity and empathy, which both are not good. That was pretty much what I understood they take on prescription drugs to be. They also mentioned how prescriptions support the capitalization on time for doctors. And that, my friend, is you listening? Prescription medications help doctors capitalize on time. They also talked about the difference between corporate drugs and public domain. Corporate drugs are what the pharmaceutical companies want you on. Why? Because corporate drugs create customers, repeat customers, lifelong customers. However, when something is a public domain, that means that it does not have a patent. So no one person can say that they own it. They can't say this is mine. They can't say if you want access to my patent, you got to pay for it. And that's what pharmaceutical drugs are. From your generic drugs all the way up to the original of whatever the generic is a generic for. Weed is a public domain. You cannot put a patent on weed. And as it pertains to psychedelic mushrooms, that is something that I'm gonna use another documentary to talk about, but that's kind of something that is developing in the psilocybin world as we fucking speak. It's going on literally right fucking now. The big difference between pharmaceuticals and medicines, as they are referring to plants, is that medicine lets you explore and it helps you to understand. Pharmaceuticals don't do that. Pharmaceuticals suppress the symptoms, they suppress the emotions, and they cause you to become reliant on them to help you mask whatever it is that you're trying to combat. When it comes to Neurons to Nirvana, I'm going to give it a solid 9.5 out of 10. Well, damn, what would have made it a 10 if I would have understood some of the other stuff? So it probably is 10, but some stuff just went way over my head. But the visuals was real good. The way they broke down a lot of stuff was real good. The way that they combed through every single different drug in its own category, I loved every last bit of that. Yeah, so if you're interested in watching Neurons to Nirvana, it is on Tubi. It is free. It is 1 hour and 9 minutes. And it is the best 1 hour and 9 minutes that you can spend learning about different types of hallucinogens, psychedelics, and the ways in which these different things are shaping our societies. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Comments, like, and subscribe, and I will catch y'all on the flip side. Peace out.